So can we talk about how amazing the usage of CGI was in this episode? Like, just look at this image real quick. Now, when you take a really good look at it, you can notice the CGI. But I'm willing to bet if you weren't really hard focusing on the art and animation while watching this episode, it probably went over your head and you didn't really notice it. Which I think is glorious. I want to explain the reason why this scene is why I want to talk about first in this video. The reason why it's so good and why I'm actually praising this CGI is because I've seen a lot of anime this year alone. Not just in my time of watching anime, but just this year alone. I've seen anime use CGI for armies coming in that just looks absolutely horrid. And I hate to say it, Overlord is one of those series that is a part of that category. It is one of the reasons why I was very disappointed with the final episodes of the Overlord anime. Even though I love the Overlord anime because the story is so good, I can normally overlook the CGI. It was obviously lacking in a lot of areas and didn't really stand up to the glorious nature that the light novel had. But not getting into that type of stuff, I just wanted to say that with this image, when you just see this entire sequence with the orcs just basically charging and all that, marching an army, you really get a sense of that there is a literal army coming into the forest, about to invade the Lizardmen, about to, invade where, our main character Rimuru is. We have a sense of dread going on. And just the way the army was marching, to the way the dust effect was easily covering, the CGI, to how there was actually some 2D art animation put into that scene alongside of the, CGI, it made it flow so much better. And I'm just really happy and proud of this series for doing something like that, because honestly, I was a little bit concerned, because this arc, after reading it in the manga, I'm still reading the light novel, by the way, but reading it in the manga, the POV is massive, because you have it to where it zooms out and you see this massive battlefield and all that, and I'm really glad to see that, at the very least, the studio and all the people working on this is, at the very least, trying to go out of their way to make it actually seem really high quality. Even if they are cutting corners in some ways, they still are trying to hide it the best way they can, and I appreciate that. So just credit goes to the people that worked on this episode and has worked on this series and continues to work on it. It just once again continues to stun me with how high quality Reincarnated as a Slime is, and how this series really deserves all the credit it has been receiving since it started airing this anime season. And I do hope one day this series continues to rise in popularity, and maybe one day we can get a season 2. But for now though, let's get into the main content of this episode. So, the ogres that was introduced recently get new character designs. Now, I've seen a mixed bag today with people's reactions to it, and when I was reading the manga, it wasn't really as obvious compared to how the anime depicted it, but in the manga, I actually preferred the new designs of the ogres. When, they got their names and they had the new transformations and all that, I actually preferred those designs in the manga, and I didn't really think too much about it, the features they lost, when that did happen within the manga. But seeing it in the anime form, I'm on the side right now that's a little bit upset that they didn't keep their old character designs when they were actually ogres, and let me explain. So I want to have a couple images obviously popped up here and showing the differences between, their once ogre form and their new form after receiving a name from Rimuru, and you can just see how their designs were kind of dumbed down a bit. For instance, when you look at how their ogre forms were, like the main head honcho, like the dude that's leading the party with the red hair, you could see that his design in ogre form looks so much more detailed. He doesn't look like a typical Mel character. He has this really nice design with everything, to his hair, to his facial structure. Everything about it looks really cool. And when you see his humanoid form, like this human looking form he has after he gets his name, it looks very dumbed down. His skin doesn't have the same look to it. His facial structure isn't as rigid or cool looking as how he was as an ogre. And I'm really upset about that. It just really lowered the quality of his character design. And this isn't technically the anime studio's fault. I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. This was already a thing in, the light novel, illustrations, and the manga. It became very apparent in the anime just how much the design was dumbed down to make it easier to just probably draw the characters or something. But that isn't the only design that really is lacking. Almost every single character design from the ogres was dumbed down. The only one that actually looks really good is probably the one that looks like a middle-aged old man. I think his name is Kuro or whatever. And then you have the old man, which was teaching Gobta and all that in this episode. Those two designs, they look a lot better with their new forms. Their old designs are okay, but I do prefer their new designs. However, when it comes to every other character, I think, like I said, it was dumbed down. Like, let's look at the Ogre Princess for a second. Now, look at this design. If you clearly look at these two designs, their facial structure and everything, it's obvious which one is better. When you look at her new form, she looks like a pretty beautiful princess, like a typical Hime, which is fine. It's a really good design. Like, I'm not knocking her design. However, when you compare it to her old design she had at the beginning of this episode and last episode, you could see how the design was really dumbed down. Like, the whole tattoos, like the facial painting and stuff on her face, and the fangs and all that coming out of her mouth, it looks so detailed, looks so cool, and when you see how that's all gone now with her new, form, you're like, wow, I actually missed that. I missed that face paint she had under her eyes. It makes me kind of upset. And when you look at this other one, you could see also how the details of her facial structure was also dumbed down, and like I said, I'm a little bit upset with that, and it's not the anime studio's fault by any means. It's just, I really wish we could have kept the old designs instead of these new designs, because it's clear as day that the old designs are just very superior in some ways. At least they don't look like typical female characters or male characters. They actually look very unique in this world. But okay, stopping that for now though, let's carry on. So the big point of this episode was setting up the conflict with the orcs, but also introducing a new cast of characters that are going to be joining Rimuru's group. Obviously, the ogres that have been around for these past few episodes have now joined Rimuru's ranks temporarily. It was stated within this episode that once the whole situation with the orcs are done, they could potentially either stay with Rimuru, or they could go off and probably start their own, civilization, reconstruct the ogres once again, whatever could potentially happen. But for now, though, basically, they have now joined Rimuru's forces. They are his subordinates, and it's pretty cool with what, the main head of the party said. He's like, hey, look, we're a warring race and all that, so technically, we don't really care who we work for, as long as if the individual is worthy of our respect and is strong. That's even better. So, obviously, after seeing Rimuru's strength and what he demonstrated in the last episode, they're very happy with his strength and how he is a strong ruler, and on top of that, since they're a warring, faction, they would be very happy with serving underneath him if something happens, so they're very happy with that. And they're also very honored by the fact that Rimuru would, go out of his way to take on their problems that they're facing and help them out, because they even say in this episode, if they were to join Rimuru, technically he would be taking on their goal. For instance, they want to get vengeance. They want to get revenge against what happened to them, what the orcs did. So obviously what they want to do is just go out there and start hunting. And, as soon as Rimuru allows him into his group, he's expected to follow up on that. He has to follow up on that, or, he let them down. He's, lying to them. So Rimuru did a big play in this episode. He was doing something that was setting up strong allies for himself, but he also has an objective now to be able to take down the orcs and figure out what's really going on here. Obviously, with what's been set up ever since what happened a few episodes back where Rimuru got his human form, he's been wanting to know more about demon lords and stuff, so obviously when he found out that this whole situation maybe with the orc lord and all that and the orcs could be related to some form of demon, obviously he wants to know more and he's getting interested, so this does in line with the main plot that's been set up a few episodes back, so nothing wrong with that. So, anyways, let's talk about the orcs. So, from what you can clearly see from this episode, from the description that's being stated about this army that's charging into the Great Forest, is that these orcs don't really have a sense of fear or terror. For instance, what the ogre said in this episode was that when they were cutting down, the orcs, when they saw their brethren fall to the ground, they did not react at all. They did not get scared. They did not look at their brethren. They didn't freak out. They kept marching forward like an endless horde, kind of like zombies or something, not giving a crap about anything around them, which in a lot of ways is very scary. Because you got to think about it like this from this perspective. If you're in a fight, a big war or whatever, and you're fighting enemies that legit don't care care about their own lives and don't care about anyone around them, and they're just charging endlessly at you, that's pretty frightening. That's really frightening in a fight. You cannot tell me that is not frightening, because one of the big things that sets people back from doing some really crazy stuff in real life is the fact that they fear death. And if these orcs itself do not fear anything, they're just charging and they don't care what's going on around them, that's scary. So, the orcs are not to be messed with. They're, I guess, the way they're being organized by the Orc Lord is not something to underestimate, and obviously it's going to be a very difficult battle. Now, there also is other little setups going on behind the scenes. We now know that there's this situation with this dude, this Majin with the mask that's going around giving names to individual monsters. He gave a name to, the Goblin's brother. We also know that he was trying to give a name to the Ogres, and then he gave a name to a Lizardman, which was introduced in this episode. So we know that there's a dude trying to start some beef conflict, and most likely he's also related with the whole situation with the orcs. So, yeah, there is a lot of, messing around, playing all sides, trying to get some conflict stirred up. Now, speaking of the Lizardmen, though, we get introduced to this species in, this episode, and I'm really, in a lot of ways, I like some of their designs of how they're depicted in this episode, but if there's one design that really kind of felt off to me, it was her design right here. I don't know, just something about the design really felt off to me after reading the manga. I was just like, that's a really, I don't know, just something about it feels very different to the manga. I had to go back and look, but I mean, overall, I really liked the background images of all that when it came to the scene with the Lizardmen when they were introduced. I loved the throne scene where the king is just sitting in the throne and all that. I liked just all the way it was depicted. I think overall, the way the voice actors handled it, they got the entire scene across, so honestly, I'm not disappointed with anything on that end, and they did cover all the necessary elements that needed to be covered for the plot going forward for this arc. Now, let's see here. What is left to talk about? Let's see here. I guess one of the big things really to talk about now is the whole thing with the Lizardmen, the prince, that apparently is being talked about, like all his, subordinates underneath him that are traveling with him, is trying to build up his ego, like, hey, when are you going to become the chieftain? And this could be very dangerous. When you really think about the entire situation, it can be very dangerous, because obviously building up the ego of someone that obviously doesn't seem to be as competent maybe as his father is not necessarily a good thing, which could lead into a lot of problems in future endeavors. So there's definitely a little bit of a plot point being set up there with this episode. So I think that's pretty much it when it comes to this week's episode of Reincarnated as a Slime. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And with that, Chibi out.